Welcome back to another episode of TrueNAS Tech Talk. This week, we'll be talking about the 2504.2 release, of course, fresh out of the oven after a little bit of extra baking time. But we're also going to dig into a future feature coming, which is OpenZFS AnyRaid, sponsored by our friends over at HexOS, that should add some significant flexibility to our pool construction options. Chris, I think let's go into that one first because there's lots of really, exciting information in there. I know people have been asking for
Mhm.
some ways to increase flexibility. So let's talk a bit about AnyRaid, but maybe
This is
let's
the
talk about
title
the
card for the thumbnail right here. Everyone's be like, "Ooh,
absolutely,
they're talking about a new raid thing." This is gets
yeah.
attention. So this is
Now,
good. A lot of people have asked.
yeah, this one is currently, it's under development and it's,
Mhm.
a very, very fresh thing. It's not going to be in TrueNAS possibly for a bit, but let's
Yeah.
just sort of lay the groundwork here. So let's talk about the current way that ZFS works here. So
Sure.
basically, we know how this works. ZFS and mirrors. Everybody knows this one. You're limited by that smallest drive size in the
Mhm.
VDEV. Like Chris, I mean,
Mhm.
people, this is one of the things that people have given us a bit of grief about with the choice of ZFS as our only supported file system, right?
Well, and at the end of the day, for all good reasons, it's an enterprise file system, so it has enterprise requirements, and that's been going back to the very first days in Sun when they were working on ZFS. That was their target audience. They had a mission, they went after it, and they set up everything accordingly. But over the years, of course, people have always asked, like, yes, but I want to do more home labby things with ZFS and use it for more I guess, downstream, smaller type systems that aren't maybe as enterprise equipped and people can't get a hold of, say, 10 of the exact same drives and all that good stuff. So there's always been this kind of nagging demand in the background from people saying, but I have these 4 random drives here, or these 6 random drives,
Yeah,
or whatever, and I want to just throw whatever I have into a system and make it all work. And ZFS has always been kind of like, don't do that. That used to be when
exactly.
you'd go post it to the forums and someone would flame you. I think that actually might
Yeah,
still
that
happen now, even. So
yeah,
be cautious.
we're gonna we're gonna work on that. People, it's fine to ask questions. People shouldn't
Mhm.
be jerks to somebody for asking a question that's maybe is, you might have seen it asked a bunch of times before, but maybe this is their first experience with ZFS, and there's a lot of new people out there, a lot of new listeners, new people installing TrueNAS for the very first time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
they'll come
it's
up and
not
they'll
an
say,
unreasonable thing to ask,
yeah,
right? Somebody saying, "Hey, I heard about this cool TrueNAS thing, and by the way, I have this gear sitting here. Who knows where they got it?" A lot of people's first TrueNAS is just repurposed hardware. I mean,
exactly.
that's what it is. So
And
again,
maybe they
the
have like
question's going to come.
maybe they got a 2 terabyte, a 4 terabyte, and a 6 terabyte
Mhm.
drive, and they say, "Hey, why can't I put the 2 and the 4 together to mirror the 6?"
Yeah.
And that's something that we can't do with current ZFS, but any RAID, any RAID
Yeah.
could make that a possibility.
Now,
So
now we're getting into some different territory here, which is a great thing. So AnyRaid does kind of finally open the door to those kind of mismatched drive sets and being able to more easily expand later. That's actually key because it's only so good if it allows you to say, yeah, sure, I'm going to start with a 2, a 4, and a 6, but then you have no means to kind of expand later and get more space back as you add new capacity. So what's different about AnyRaid? Okay. So first of all, if you're a ZFS purist, maybe you want to, close your ears for a
here,
moment, not listen to this. This might offend your sensibilities, but again, it has a purpose. So what's going on in AnyRaid as it sits today is we're dividing disks, or I say we, but the pull request, the work that's going on is going to divide disks kind of into equal sized tiles. So this is a mirror layout. First of all, we want to say up front, there's no RAID Z, none of those good things yet. This is purely just doing mirrored sets of data. It starts off, it looks like some defaults, 1/64th the size of the smallest disk or a 16 gig minimum for these kind of tiles, if you think about them that way. This is actually where it'd be great if I had a whiteboard. Maybe someday we get more high tech and I can do fun stuff. Within those mirrored tiles, you get your logical vdevs. And within those tiles, then you kind of have mini mirrors being formed. Okay. Dynamic allocation, meaning if I'm going to go write a block, it's just going to mirror it out to 2 of the drives in my set. So what does
so
that mean in terms of the
yeah,
smallest disk, Chris?
yeah. In terms of this, like think about that example we just said of the 2, the 4,
Mhm.
and the 6 over there. It's going to say, okay, we are going to cut each of these into the smallest disk size chunks, so 1/64th of that 2 terabyte, and it's going to replicate those tiles, that same size of tile, across your 4 terabyte and your 6 terabyte. So when you need to do mirrors, it's going to say, well, I'm going to take a tile from the 2 and the
Mhm.
6. I've got it on 2 separate disks. These ones have the most available tiles. Maybe it'll say, okay, I'll do the 4 and the
A
6 for a
4 and a
bunch of
6.
times until we start to fill up the 4 enough and the 6 enough. It'll say, now we'll do the 2 and the 6.
Mhm.
So it's dynamic allocation. It's, picking the tiles on demand when you do the writes. It's not unlike how ZFS natively treats disks in terms of what they call meta slabs, which cuts the disk up into, I think it tries to target as close as possible, but not over 200
Hmm.
different meta slabs on a disk. So in this case, the tiles do 1/64th. So it's trying to split them up in that way in order to not create too many of these
Yeah.
logical vdevs. Because again, if you're cutting each disk up into 64 pieces, you're going to get 64 potentially or more logical vdevs when you start spreading them
Hmm.
around. So
Hmm.
it could become very complicated. But realistically, we'll talk about some of the max capacity limits there. It'll be
Sure.
uh, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool because basically as a write comes in, it's saying I have this like sliding rotation. I can look and say, oh, I just need to have parity. Again, it's a mirror, so I need to make sure I hit 2 physical drives. I have space here. Great. One part of the block here, the other copy here. Move on, right? And as you expand, it means you do gain more capacity now, right? Because you have another pool of potential blocks you can toss on. So you can have kind of these mix match drive sizes where, yeah, sure, your 2 terabytes going to fill up first, of course. But, oh, guess what? There's still free space left on the 4 and the 6, and you just tossed an 8 in. Keep on
The
rolling.
and because it's limited to mirrors initially, it makes sort of that decision-making algorithm much simpler. You
Yeah.
don't have to say, "Hey, we need to do parity. We need to have, the rotation of 1, 2, 3." When you
Mhm.
introduce those, you're gonna have probably a greater number of minimum disks required in order
Yeah.
to be able to cycle effectively around them. It's still in its very early stages of development, so you can expect there's gonna be a lot of sort of churn on this, but as we mentioned in the last episode, this is a great opportunity. If you've got a spared system and, hey, you not only can use any disks that you have lying around, but you probably should use any disks you have
Mhm.
lying around. Throw an old 500 gig, a 1 terabyte, and a 2 terabyte in there
Sure.
and start benchmarking it. Give some debug results. Maybe they'll be asking like, "Hey, could somebody take 3 different sizes of disks, throw a bunch of data on it, and grab a bunch of results and just ship them up to us?" You know, that would work great.
And for you ZFS snobs in the forums, remember, not all workloads are created equal. Sometimes you just need something that's a backup target, right?
Yeah.
Or you don't care about the performance. All I wanna know is that I have data protection, right? ZFS is doing what ZFS does best, which is protect my data on disk. And of course, this is obviously not going to be the ideal situation. So if you're an enterprise type user, this probably isn't the solution for you.
Oh
But
yeah.
again, you're a home labber or you have a backup system where you only have access to, repurposed hardware and all that, this can be a valid option.
If you're only connecting to this system over gigabit Ethernet, you're
Yeah.
probably still you're going to be bottlenecked by your network connection 99% of the time.
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
key. It's pretty easy to get yourself capped at gigabit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the other caps though with this, Chris, because there are some limitations we should probably talk about that exist in the code base right now,
Yeah,
subject to
it's
change.
a tech talk. So let's talk some tech here. Um,
Hmm.
tile mappings. That's basically like the layout of all these different disks. That's stored at the start of each disk, so it's not in the main object set to avoid sort of
Hmm.
the getting started issues. Obviously, that tile map's pretty critical because you lose that tile map, you won't know where things are. So just
Yeah.
like you store multiple copies of the ZFS Uber block at the top of the tree in your ZFS file system, those rotate through 32. But in this case, we have, I believe there's 4 rotating copies of
Four
the tile
copies
map,
of it. Yep.
which is
Yep.
just like a regular ZFS label. So you got 4 rotating copies of the tile map there. The
So
tile
why
map
is that
also has a
important, Chris? Because that needs to protect you, I assume, from one drive failing or one sector in a drive fails in an unfortunate spot, and guess what? You
yeah,
can't recover.
exactly. It's the idea of having multiple copies of the metadata even on that same single disk. So you say, hey,
Hmm.
if a sector at the start of my drive fails, I want to be able to get a second copy of that tile map from the next stage, or maybe even at the end of the
Yeah.
disk. We're going to keep it there. Um,
Yep.
but I know there's a limitation on that tile map size as well, right?
Yeah, 64 megabytes right now. Again,
Okay.
currently. So if you're watching this 2 years down the road, go look at whatever landed in the upstream OpenZFS repo by then.
Yeah. And then what we do have a disk limitation. I think it's
Yeah.
it's 256
Okay.
disks. So you're not going to do a massive multi-chassis expansion of ZFS AnyRaid. When you get up to that size, it's kind of the idea of maybe that's where you want to use a traditional RAID Z at that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're pushing 256, anyway. Like, I think you have enough hardware and all that, you can probably afford to do it the right way, the more enterprise blessed way with ZFS and not use AnyRaid. So, but
Yeah.
again, that's generous, I think.
Yeah, and then we do have some limitations. I think it's that 64K, so 65,536 individual tiles can be on a disk.
Hmm.
So the math in my head makes that I believe that the largest disk you have that the roughly 1,000 times difference. So if you
Yeah.
started with a 1 terabyte disk with AnyRaid, and eventually we get to the point where we're buying petabyte size drives, you could put a 1 terabyte and a 1 petabyte in the same AnyRaid, and it would potentially work.
Again,
You might have some real funny math and space allocation
yeah.
challenges, but
Okay, then that probably should get you appropriately flamed on the forums if you post that in your config. So
that's
please, if you're watching this in the future, don't post that I did a 1 terabyte and a 1 petabyte drive in the same config.
exactly.
Don't,
Well, you can post that you will do it, but people may tell you it's probably a poor decision. You may not
yes,
get the
yes,
results you want.
in
Yeah,
not such kind language, I would assume.
yeah. Maybe not, but do be nice on the forums, guys. Come on, don't make me take
Hmm.
time on my days off to go and tone police. I don't like doing that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, we got
just
some other
another day with the
limitations
internet.
here.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
do have
So
some.
we mentioned mirror
Yeah,
only right now.
yeah, no RAID Z. But we can do all the other things, right? We can resilver, we can remove, we can
Yeah.
scrub.
And before anyone complains, real quick caveat: RAID Z type is expected down the road. It's not in the pull request as it sits today, which again, this is all preliminary stuff. But at some point later, we expect there will be some sort of RAID Z implementation, so it's not just mirrors.
Yeah, it makes it more complicated, certainly, to do the
Hmm.
allocation when you need to have, the two drives and the parity piece or, all of those different things. It makes it a lot harder to do. So the first step was mirrors. Mirrors
Hmm.
is a good way to do it. It means you get 50% of the total capacity of all of those, mixed bag of disks that you threw in there. But,
Yep.
crucially, we wanted the full operation support. So we have resilver, removal, scrub, and, we're
Yep.
hoping that the upcoming ZFS rewrite command is going to work just great there as well, because it'll
Yeah,
mean,
that might
hey,
be great.
tack on that additional mixed size drive, run a ZFS rewrite, and everything will sort of shuffle itself around. Now,
Yeah.
it might take a good bit of time depending on the speed of those disks you got in the pool. And
Hmm.
again, when you're picking those ones to throw in, a lot of people say, "Oh, let's put leftover hardware." You probably do want to, at least give them some testing, check their smart stats. If you're going to mix, a brand new drive with one that's been running for, 100,000
5
hours,
years.
you know, eh, maybe it's one of those things where you go, that one might not have a lot of life left on the spindle. So again,
Yeah.
it's
Fair
a
enough.
configuration option, doesn't protect you from bad hardware choices. It just gives you more things to do.
Hmm.
Um, so we're also
Oh, we should
working
talk about
on.
expansion is supported as well. That's
Yep.
important. That's probably the key thing people want to know is, can I go then toss that fifth disk in or that sixth disk later and get more capacity? Yes.
And can we replace if I threw a 1 terabyte into start, can I then replace that with a 4 terabyte or an 8 terabyte if I get one of those from a hand-me-down system? Um, and then I think we're working on the VDEV, the shrinking, so contracting it as well, because
Hmm.
everything's sort of broken down into these tiles with there being logical mirrors on them. Again, we've worked with ZFS removal. We know that when you have nothing but mirrors, you can start
Yeah.
removing drives. So you might be able to say, hey, all of these logical mirrors are, half of them is on this one physical disk, and we've just put a new one in. We can probably remove those and, sort of shift it
Just
across. Yeah.
shuffle the
Do the
bits over.
shuffle, turn it
And
into a
that could
three-way
be,
mirror temporarily, and then remove the old guy.
yeah. And maybe that's a limitation on the future RAID Z work as well. We'll have to wait and see what ends up landing. It might have the same RAID Z limitations where you can't do that removal. And that's fine, but you just got to know what you're getting into in advance. So plan accordingly.
Yeah. There's a lot of exciting things happening with this, and a lot of it was made possible by some of the previous content. So it's always with ZFS, you're always sort of standing on the accomplishments that you built in the past, and we're just trying to sort of not just build up taller, but also widen that foundation so that you have
Hmm.
more and more things that they might not be in the path up sort of the food chain that people look. They say, well, this isn't for me, and that's fine. I can say most confidently that I couldn't see myself making an AnyRaid out of any of my systems. I'd say, you know
Yeah.
what? It's not for me, but there's probably people out there who are going, this is 100% for me. And absolutely, we'll be glad to
Well,
deliver it to you
remember,
when it's ready.
it's about lowering the bar. for entry, right? At the end of the day,
Exactly.
sure, if it's not if you're already a hardcore TrueNAS ZFS user, you may already say, "I've got all the enterprise gear, I'm good, it's not for you." That's fine. But other people are just starting their journey. And again, sometimes you only got access to the hardware you got access to. And so would you rather say, "No, you're barred from using it and trying it and falling in love with it," or give them the tools to go and build a system and try it out and kick the tires? And guess what? They may eventually graduate to here's a more enterprise build down the road. But again, lowering
Yeah,
the bar provides more usability. And one of the cool things about TrueNAS has always been that people are always tossing it on older hardware and trying things out. And because ZFS is so darn good and reliable, that's a pretty valid use case. So keep it
exactly.
up.
And
This is a welcome addition. I'm sure we'll be talking more about it in the future, Chris, when it starts merging and we start seeing it land in upstream, and kind of give an update and a refresher on what the current state of things are when that happens.
yeah, we're really being, really looking forward to having this out because, like you said, it's removing a lot of barriers to entry for some of our new
Mhm.
users. Well,
Absolutely.
let's
Okay.
talk.
Well,
Hey, let's talk about some new stuff now. So, new stuff that's a little bit closer to release, and in fact is just coming out. So we have 2504.2. As we mentioned, it needed a little bit of extra time in the oven. We were hoping to get it out, last week and even a little bit
mhm,
earlier this week, but we had to go just do some extra validation passes, check out a few things. The push is out there. The update is ready, and hopefully, this will also resolve the updates available bug that we had on the
mhm,
screen there for those of you who did the early jump into Fangtooth. But one of the big things that's coming back, of course, we have Virtualization Classic. So that menu is back there. That means the virtualization features are now split between virtual machines and that containers screen, Chris.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, that is correct. And we've talked at length about this, so I won't go into all the gory details. But as a recap for people who haven't maybe seen previous episodes, if you're coming from Electric Eel, migrating to Fangtooth, you have VMs. It means that migration is seamless again. You'll be able to boot up. Your VMs will still appear in the VMs tab just like they did before. And there's no real manual intervention required. You're just kind of good to go, rock and roll.
yeah,
And we've
we did.
had, I think
And
we have a question later actually about this. I don't know if we want
yeah, I
to
was
get
going to
into it
say,
now.
let's just pop it as a sidebar right now, real quick. So somebody says, "Hey, I created a VM in Fangtooth. Does that mean I can't migrate this volume in the disk back to the classic one?"
No.
So in 2504.2, you'd have to
Mhm.
do that manually. So your new VM that you created is still going to live under that container screen. It's going to be there. It's going to
Mhm.
continue to run just as it was.
Instances, but yes.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
instances, not
Yeah,
containers.
yeah. Yeah, that's
I
what
thought
it's
we
called,
renamed that one.
instances in the UI. Yep.
My bad. All
Eventually, it
right.
will be. Anyway.
Okay. But in 2510, I believe we're working towards something, Chris, that will hopefully allow
Mhm.
you to say, if you want to, you're going to take that machine that was in your instances screen, it's going to come back into the Virtualization Classic menu,
Yeah.
which will just become our regular virtualization.
Absolutely. So again, nope, I can't promise 100% that every single case will be fully automated where the migration will happen. Again, people have a lot of interesting configs, and so you can't always catch every edge case. But at bare minimum, I can assure you at least the drives, the volumes, all that good stuff, the stuff that really matters for your VM will persist. You can move that over. You can bring that back up in the VM section, and then we will do our best to see if we can accommodate as many types of configurations as possible to make that seamless. So
Yeah.
anyway, keep an eye. Again, Goldeye, this is the fall release 2510 we're talking about. We haven't even gotten into beta for that yet. We still got a ways to go. But yeah, a lot of work going in that direction right now.
Yeah. We did a few other changes along here. There were a couple of cloud providers. I think we made some alterations to. I know one of them said that they don't have technical support for our clone due to their bugs in their side on the implementation. So
Yeah,
I
that
think it
was a
was
mega.
Mega. We had to remove that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, sometimes you got to because if the underlying tool that you're using just no longer supports the service and the company says, "Yeah, too bad, we're not fixing." Okay, fine. So it
yeah,
got yanked out. Let's see here. Some other things. Oh, this is actually an interesting one. So if you're using StoreJ or doing any cloud sync, we added some optional endpoints. So why does this matter? Well, some folks have restrictions on where they can have their data live. By default, StoreJ can be distributed all across the world, and that's intentional for that kind of continental level redundancy, which is interesting. I don't think we've ever had to put that to the test. But if you do say no, I want to be region locked, my data can only live in the EU, for example, or in the US, that's now a feature you can go turn on. And then the classic virtualization page, there's been some additions for the .2 for secure boot. So you can go and check a box and enable that. That's some Windows 11 love for people who want to run Windows 11 in a VM.
yeah. For those of you who insist on still running Windows, myself included. Sorry, Chris.
Hey, you know what? Some people got to. I get it. I won't hate on them. Not that much anyway.
We added a little bit more in the debug files as well. We're trying to do like layer one troubleshooting for network interfaces. We got, I think it's ETH tool output is now collected with the debugs.
Mhm. Mhm.
Again, when we talk about the debug files, those are used for when you're sending troubleshooting tickets up into, us here at TrueNAS. Please don't post them on the forums because they'll probably share a lot more information about your system than you were intending to, whether it's internal IP addresses or, the username of a replication credential that you got tunneled over to another machine.
Yeah.
Don't share those debugs on the public forum. Don't post them on Reddit or something. Don't send them to any random person. Those are meant for, your own introspection or for investigation by,
Yeah.
TrueNAS employees.
It's a developer tool, so treat it as such. Again, you're working with a developer to troubleshoot a real sticky problem, and that's how we do it. We got to collect as much data because we're just not going to usually have access to your system. Although occasionally somebody will hop on a team viewer with us and we can go troubleshoot in real time, but that doesn't happen very often. So the debug is our next best way to get as much information as we can because 9 times out of 10, we need to be able to replicate internally what your problem is because you may be seeing something new. Maybe you have a little more esoteric configuration. Sometimes it's hardware specific, but the more telemetry and data we have, we can go spin up something in the lab that kind of approximates as closely as we can get to your situation. And once we can kind of see it and lay hands on it and touch it, then it's easy for a dev to get in there and test fixes and make sure that the fix works. So anyway,
Yeah,
keep those coming. But as Chris said, please don't post them to people you don't trust.
absolutely. Well, let's get into a few little quick Q&As here, I guess, Chris, today. So
Yep.
we're looking at a couple here. We had Mark wrote in and he said he was preparing to do a core to scale migration. Welcome to
Hmm.
the scale and community edition team. He says, but what I did was, he says, I manually created a TrueNAS_admin account when it was announced that that was going to happen in scale. He says, I figured I'd get ahead of the change. That was a mistake. I didn't realize the ramifications and I didn't create an associated home directory for that user. Now it's locked
Hmm.
to var empty and it can't be
Yeah.
changed because that account is restricted in the middleware. Says it causes some slight issues with using the shell. It doesn't remember any commands. It's not the end of the world, but it's a minor pain. Is there a
Yeah.
way to assign a home directory right now? So that was
Yeah.
something that we introduced some restrictions on sort of those built-in accounts in the middleware, and I believe it was 2504 we did that. But
Hmm.
what do you think here, Chris?
Yeah, you don't want sneaky things happening to your admin accounts kind of behind the scenes, so we gotta treat those a little more carefully. Again, it's annoying, so yes, you lose your shell history. Okay, maybe you can live with that, maybe you can't. Worst case scenario, you might just go into the UI and click delete and recreate the account and just set the home directory the way you want it now the
Yeah,
next time,
there,
and it'll be locked into the new location, so again, you'll have to repeat if you ever decide to change it again down the road, but if having that shell history and having a valid home is important to you, that's the way to do it. If it takes you longer than a minute, you're doing it wrong, so
yeah.
please don't
There's
stress.
there's nothing inherently special about those admin accounts. Just if you create a new user and you add it to the TrueNAS Web Administrators, I think is
Yeah.
the group there.
There are
I,
TrueNAS administrators, and there's a read-only administrators, and yeah, there's some different
there it
groups
is.
you add it to.
So most likely, Mark, you can just delete that existing your pre-created TrueNAS_admin and then create a new one. I don't know if you can use that
Well,
same name or you might just want to use a separate admin
so
name.
here's my thing is I actually don't use that name for my admin accounts. I make a custom name because I don't like the username being known either. So maybe use this as an opportunity to have some good hygiene. Again, we have a default because you have to have a default. There's going to have to be a default somewhere, but go make up your own username and just grant it the admin account privileges, set your home directory right, and away you go. Then you can not need to use the TrueNAS admin account at all.
There you go. We got another question in from John. He says, "Can we talk about space reporting a little bit?" And he shared this example of some output from the shell that shows a different amounts of size and allocation versus what's in the UI. I think we've talked about this a bit, Chris, but space accounting on ZFS can be really difficult when we get into involving compression and block cloning, deduplication.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we always get
it's
into this and the team always is asked fairly, I will admit, like, "Oh, it'd be great if you could make this easier and just show something in the UI directly that shows this is the ratios I'm getting, this is the compression ratio, how much block cloning, all that good stuff." And then you go talk to the file system guys, and you
yeah,
always know when they say, "It depends," is the answer to every
yeah,
question, because there's a caveat for everything, and it's hard to get accurate values, and the cost of getting those values is sometimes very high. And by cost, I mean like performance hit and cost and kind of the accounting you have to do in the background. And so there's always this tension between we could do more, but do we want to sacrifice some performance to go and be monitoring that constantly?
Yeah, and it might, maybe it's something we have to look at doing like as an asynchronous background job, but then we add the
Mhm.
challenge of, okay, now your UI might be a little bit out of date
It's
in
out
those
of date,
space
right?
recording. And I also noticed
What's
that in
worse,
the
no info or info that's
wrong
wrong
info,
because it's
wrong
yeah.
info is typically better, or typically a worse situation to be in than no info. But I mean, just looking at the example he said, like I see something where it says block clone save is something like 38 terabytes. So I mean, good on you for getting that much data saved by block
Mhm.
clone, but it does beg the question of what kind of workflow is this? I'm really
Yeah, what do
curious.
you
I'm going to have to go.
well, this could be CI/CD. Like, there's a
There you
good use
go.
case. Okay, cool.
Absolutely. And maybe that's the challenge because it says, space used logically is a lot bigger than that because you've block cloned a whole bunch of your files, but the capacity of your pool is actually not being used by those block cloned files. So how do we find a good way to represent that?
Mhm.
Certainly, like let us know if you got some suggestions. I see you did link a forum thread, so we'll jump into there. We'll maybe explore. We'll have some conversation. We're always wanting to learn and get the insight from the community as to sort of what the ideas are of how we can best address this. We do have to reconcile it with, like Kris said, how expensive is it to gather this information on the
Mhm.
back end for and again, we're talking not talking about dollars and cents. We're talking about seconds or milliseconds. It could be challenging, and the last thing you want to do is have some job that's constantly scraping all your metadata just to show up accurate
Yeah.
space reporting
Well, yeah, so
to the
you can
degree it
look at it
actually
once
hurts
a
performance.
week. Yeah, it's hurting you all week, so you can look at it for 5 seconds once a week or maybe even less often. So that's always the challenge, right?
Anybody who's gone a little bit and used some of those like the ZDB commands to do a full like pool histogram sizes, those take a while. Like I know I did
Mhm.
one of those based on somebody's request because they said, "Hey, how much space does metadata take up?" The approximate answer is 1% on a really
Yeah.
bad day.
Well,
But it took several minutes for it to scrape my spinning
and
disk
then
pool to spit that
and then
out.
the OS guys will tell you, "We probably shouldn't be using ZDB for this anyway because there's some potential things that could go
Yeah,
sideways there." So, again,
exactly.
it's
That's
a challenging it's not as straightforward as there's a number, I just need to go pull from the back end. It doesn't quite work that way.
yeah,
But, yeah.
it's a little
Down
bit difficult there.
it's one of those things that's on our radar. We're well aware of it. We'd like to make it better, and I expect it will be in the future, but it's, not as trivial as it would seem. Some things seem super trivial, and you find out later they're really not.
Yeah. All right. Hey,
Okay. Next up, we have a question about Home Assistant. I'll take this one because I'm aware of this. Somebody on
yeah,
YouTube, he's
yeah.
asking about, I'm hearing a Home Assistant, or maybe should we have an OS specific LXC container in the dropdown? He's referencing the show last week, I believe, where we were talking about how we may have the ability to go push our own LXC instances, kind of custom built for TrueNAS. So this one specifically, I think it's less likely. And the reason I say that is if you haven't seen the news, Home Assistant has announced they're going to be deprecating kind of the support for LXC versions of Home Assistant. Like that's been a thing, but I guess it doesn't have a lot of traction in the community. It's probably been about a month since I think I saw that notice. They're really only going to be supporting the Docker image and the VM. Those are the two things they're going to support going forward. So all that to say, could someone put together and do an unsupported thing? Maybe, but it's kind of weird to go to all the trouble to put it in the catalog and then you're running this unsupported weird thing, which even Home Assistant says don't do.
Yeah, it might be the case where in the VMs, that's a scenario where maybe we could say let's find a way to make a VM import process because they
Yes.
distribute it. They
Well,
distribute it as a VMDK. Is it an OVA appliance? Maybe there's a great way to have us be able
I'll
to
do you one
import
better.
something like that, right,
I'll do you
Kris?
one better because the catalog doesn't distinguish between just container LXC versus VMs. It doesn't mean down the road we won't have a Home Assistant VM in the catalog ready to go with
Uh,
kind of a one-click deployment because that's a thing we can do too. So maybe that's the thing that first shows up is you will have HAOS as an option in the dropdown. So instead of Debian or Ubuntu, HAOS, click deploy, and it's just deploying the VM and away you go. That's how I'm running my Home Assistant because at the end of the day, I did run the Docker for a while. It's just too limited. I really need the plugins and add-ons and all that good stuff because I have a complicated house and setup. So HAOS
exactly.
it is.
All right. Hey, here's an easy one that's probably more for my department. Is from YouTube. Phyllis Soper says, "I want some large wallpapers of sort of our mascots there. The fang tooth and the electric eel mascot there, and the fish that we use." He says, "I want all the next and the next and the next and the previous ones too. Let me go talk to our graphics design team, see if they've got any real high res stuff. I know we've used a few of them for backgrounds on thumbnails or
Mhm.
announcement things on our blogs. Let me see if I can find some wallpapers for you. I don't know if I can promise 4K, but I'll see what I can do and see what we've got on the bank."
Nice. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Maybe a little section of wallpaper fan art on the forums. That could be fun.
Absolutely. And then just there's one little bonus thing I did notice on our forums, so I'm going to have to dig it up and give you a proper shout out and attribution in the comments here, but I don't remember the gentleman's name, unfortunately. Somebody found a fix for the fan noise of fan ramp up and down on one particular vendor's ARC A310 card. It's
Hmm.
from Sparkle. It was very popular because it's low profile and it's single slot, and it doesn't need a power source, of course, being an A310, so it fits in just about anything. The challenge a lot of users had was the stock firmware on these cards under Linux kept ramping its fan up and down, up and down. If it had stayed at a
Huh.
consistent speed, wouldn't be as annoying to hear.
Annoying.
But
Yeah.
people were finding it was, especially in a living room build, which some of these users have, they said, hey, it's really distracting, especially if there's a movie going on and you can hear the fan, going up and down, up and down. So somebody actually found the firmware is located in the Windows driver packages for these things. It's a rather complicated process, but you can actually extract the firmware from it, do some manual processes, and update the firmware on that card, which apparently for this user solved that fan ramp problem. So he
Oh,
says, hey,
nice.
it's nice and quiet now. It's much more peaceful. So I'm going to drop a link to that in the comment section. And I do apologize for not getting your name here correctly. We'll make sure we call you out and give you your props in an upcoming episode, especially if somebody says, hey, this got it fixed for me. Make sure to, flood my inbox and
Yeah.
comment section with, hey, Chris, you really should remember this guy's name if he's being so helpful.
Oh, I'm wondering, say it sounds like you probably could have just attached it to a Windows box and updated the firmware there first and then moved it back to TrueNAS. I'm almost wondering if you could do a
That's
pass-through to a Windows VM,
uh,
update the firmware that way. But
that's
so you're still
possible.
on the TrueNAS, like that's an interesting, yeah, somebody should look at that.
That's possible. I don't know if it's somebody might not want to risk their card for that because with all things
Well,
firmware and BIOS flash, it's usually, make sure you're not doing this in the middle of a thunderstorm. Usually,
let's
don't
put it
update
this
your
way,
BIOSes and your firmware.
if someone's willing to go to all the trouble to pull manually firmware images out of a Windows driver and then come up with a manual process to do it on Linux, you're already in the danger zone, my friend, either way. So you're adventurous, but have fun. Like I said, interesting to see if that works.
Exactly. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. We ran a little bit longer than we expected, given the few topics that we had, but hey, we did some interesting stuff. So
Yeah, good
just a
stuff.
quick note, just a quick note that there's going to be a little bit of travel for Chris and I. For it's business related, so don't worry, we're not out partying in the Caribbean or anything. It's a business related
Oh,
travel.
that's a shame. Dang
Yeah,
it, man.
unfortunately, we need to get more customers down in the sunny parts of the world. Certainly, some are
Mhm.
tropical. We can do the hands-on installs just for them as a special case. But
Absolutely.
so Chris and I will definitely be taking next week off and possibly even the one after. It's going to depend on how travel shakes out. But we'll try to actually post an announcement on the YouTube channel in advance to say there will or there won't be an episode, just so everybody knows what's going on. But in the meantime, if you have any further questions, please feel free to email them in to t3@truenas.com. Post them in the comment section below. Post them on our forums. Please, continue to do the usual YouTube things. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video. Leave us a comment telling why if you didn't. Hopefully you have a good time, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you soon.